Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the Community Services Committee meeting of Thursday, June 22nd, 2023 to order. Grimsby is situated on treaty land. This land is steeped in the rich history of the First Nations, such as the Haudenosaunee, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe, including the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. There are many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people from across Turtle Island that live and work in Niagara today. The Regional Municipality of Niagara and Grimsby stands with all Indigenous people, past and present, in promoting the wise stewardship of the lands on which we live. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary or non-pecuniary interest? Okay, seeing none, we will move to the approval of the agenda. Can I get a mover and a seconder to approve the agenda? Moved by Councillor DeFlavio, seconded by Councillor Howe. Resolved, all in favor? Okay, it's carried. Resolved that the June 22nd, 2023 Community Services Committee agenda be approved. So that's carried. Item number 5, receipt of the previous minutes, 5.1 Community Services Committee, May 24th, 2023, and 5.2 Grimsby Green Advisory Committee, June 1st, 2023. Can I get a mover and a seconder to receive the minutes? Moved by Councillor Korstanji and seconded by Member Laird. All in favor? Sorry. I got to do that again. Okay. Resolved that the Community Services Committee minutes of May 24th, 2023 and the Grimsby Green Advisory Committee minutes of June 1st, 2023 be received. All in favor? That's carried. Moving on to delegations and item number 6.1 Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority. First, we have Alicia Powell presenting from the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority regarding the Beamer Memorial Conservation Area. Hi, Alicia.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Kate. Thank you, everyone, for having me this evening. My name is Dr. Alicia Powell. I'm the manager of Conservation Area Programs and Services with the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority, and it's my pleasure to share with you this evening a little bit about the Beamer Memorial Conservation Area Enhancement Plan for the purpose of discussion and view of this committee. So tonight, I'll share a little bit about the conservation area itself that we know and love here in the town of Grimsby, share with you a little bit of research and data about day use and visitation on the site, as well as an overview of the current infrastructure and some of the strengths and weaknesses that we've become aware of over the past 3 years since the rise of COVID and the experience of outdoors and nature within our conservation areas here in Niagara. And then lastly, for discussion and for your view this evening, I'd like to share with you 2 different design concepts for the enhancement of the conservation area. So this is just a slide to show you the jurisdiction of the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority. As you can see, the Conservation Authority manages properties. There's 41 conservation areas across all of Niagara region, a portion of Hamilton, as well as Haldimand County. We're responsible for maintaining those properties, many of which are open for active and passive recreation. And Beaver Memorial represents a site that we share with community to engage in passive recreation like hiking and bird watching and that sort of thing. And we'll take a look at the next slide. So as you can see, Beamer Memorial is quite a large land holding here within the town of Grimsby. There are some primary access points that folks do arrive to Beamer and utilize the site. Of course, folks are accessing the property from the Lower Bruce Trail and hiking up into Beamer, as well as the main designated access point to the conservation area off of Quarry Road. And so in this image, you can see the extent of Quarry Road and the small parcel of land or the square of land at the very very western portion of the property there at the end of Quarry Road. Alternatively, there is another access point just off of Ridge Road. We work with groups in partnership to offer the opportunity to youth within the community to access the site and enjoy nature for scouting events and that sort of thing that takes place on the property. We can take a look at the next slide. The conservation area was named after John and Anna Beamer, and there's obviously a very rich United Empire Loyalist history and cultural history across the region, certainly across the escarpment and settlement area here. And our records show that the site was originally settled in the late 1700s. Of course, the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority acquired the property in 1964, and today Beamer Memorial represents our 12th largest land holding, which is quite significant in comparison with some of the other sites that we steward. Part of the Niagara Escarpment is the access point to view the beautiful Grimsby Peak to look out over Lake Ontario. And we know that Beamer represents a site with significant ecological and geological features, such that it's a significant geosite for the Niagara Peninsula Global Aspiring Geopark as well. There are a series of sediment rocks and very wonderful prominent cliffs. I like to call Beamer kind of the profile, if you're going to profile the Niagara Escarpment and show it. I think that's one really beautiful image that you can see, driving up and down the QEW and seeing Beamer there so prominent over the town. There's a diverse array of plant species within the Carolinian Forest with over 300 species of plants and old growth trees on that property. We also recognize the site as a very important bird migration area, and we work with partners on that site, including the Niagara Peninsula Hawkwatch group, to conduct monitoring, and that's one of the longest standing research collectives of such data within North America. There are also two distinct waterfalls on the property, including both a cascade and a curtain falls. Currently, Beamer is utilized for hiking. We love that. It's a segment of the Bruce Trail, of course, one of the beginning access points to Iroquois Bruce Trail. Of course, it's very popular for photography, particularly for fall foliage. In fact, it's been a site of a number of feature films and documentaries, including one on fall foliage conducted by PBS. It's a significant site for bird watching as well, and the Hawkwatch conducts their study from March 1st to May 15th during migratory period. It's phenomenal. And we know that there's a significant amount of family and youth programming that takes place on the site as well. In fact, today there were over 100 school children that visited the site, and there will be many more tomorrow as well for some year-end trips and hiking. We monitor day use visitation at our conservation areas that collected admission, and so as we can see from 2019 through 2022, those conservation areas, which include Balls Falls, Binbrook Conservation Area, and our two campgrounds, Chippewa Creek and Long Beach, have been steadily increasing in visitation. And we observe this in our passive conservation areas, or those that are utilized for hiking, as we'll see on the next slide. Beamer Conservation Area, we note in comparison in our data with our trail trackers that are present on the site, we saw peak visitation in 2021, and that aligns with the experience of many similar operators throughout the region and certainly within Southern Ontario. As we can see, October is the most popular month for folks to visit Beamer, and we can all understand why with the beautiful vistas and the color of the fall foliage across the forest and escarpment. On the next slide, we'll see Beamer in comparison with several of our other comparable Niagara Escarpment properties, including Louth Conservation Area, Rockaway Conservation Area, St. John's, and Wood End. And as you can see, Beamer's highlighted there in blue, and second to St. John's, it is our most popular conservation area that we're currently monitoring visitation through our trail trackers. We know it's the most popular in the fall months, and so you can see that blue bar skyrocket in October and November. And certainly if you can imagine the lengths of cars parking up and down Quarry Road and how busy it gets in the fall, we can all understand how popular it is for that purpose. In 2021, the NPCA released our strategic plan, and really importantly to our enhancements across our site is our strategic goal to connect more people to nature, improving our visitor services and experiences at all of our properties, particularly those that are quite heavily frequented. By improving our facilities, buildings, our trail maps and wayfinding, signage and accessibility, we'll be able to ensure that future generations are able to access and enjoy these valuable green spaces, as we saw become even more valuable through the last 3 years. And we're working really proactively to find opportunities to enhance our trail connections and partnerships and opportunities to connect with other organizations like the Bruce Trail and, of course, the municipality as well. We're very fortunate to have received a large grant through the Canadian Community Revitalization Fund and have dedicated that substantial funding to enhancing areas including Balls Falls and Binbrook, Cave Springs. I just came here from there today, where we've done some enhancement, Louth, St. John's, and Rockway. And what we're doing there is enhancing our parking and entrance areas, making them more accessible, improving our trails and making those accessible to folks as well, and also conducting a series of trail improvements, which includes wayfinding and signage. As we can see, an example from Cave Springs is our parking lot area that was installed. A number of low-impact development features were installed across the site, as well as we can see on the next slide, including a bioswale and a rain garden. On the next slide, we'll see an overview. This is an earlier vision of the conceptual land plan for Rockway Conservation Area. As you may be familiar, the MPC acquired Rockway Community Center last year, and are very fortunate to be able to provide continued and improved access to that beautiful conservation area and Bruce Trail from that site along Pelham Road. We know that the existing infrastructure at Beamer Conservation Area isn't suitable to addressing the need and the demand and the use on the site. So as you can see, in the wintertime, it's challenging to manage that small parking lot off of Quarry Road, and then to provide accessible trail into the conservation area proper. On the next slide, we see that we have really great accessible features, like an accessible trail that leads to the peaks and to our accessible viewing platform. But with limited parking and infrastructure, it's hard to get folks out there. As we can see, there's many features that are attractive to folks when visiting, and so it's important for us to take a look at our strengths, opportunities, and weaknesses and threats on the next slide. We know that this is a very significant site for geological heritage and natural heritage, for local and regional significance to our communities. It's also significant in terms of tourism and education and conservation, like the children that we're visiting and the scout groups that spend their time there week to week. We know that we do not have the capacity to accommodate increased demand and ongoing demand, as well as limited accessibility, limited signage and wayfinding, and difficult to access parking. We have an opportunity to develop an accessible and inclusive conservation area that meets the needs of our communities and those that visit us, and to engage and educate more folks when they visit our sites. But we know that it's important to have stakeholder buy-in and feedback, and that's why we're here with you this evening. We have 2 concept designs to share with you this evening. Concept number 1 shows an access into Beamer Conservation Area, maintaining the current roadway into the conservation area proper from the external parking lot, and making use of the existing mown green space to place in approximately 25 parking spaces with a roundabout for turnaway, should all of those parking spaces be full, as well as maintaining a wetland area, some seating, our existing washroom, and the bird observation tower would remain in place in this space. So in concept number 1, we can see that there's a new trail that will be developed through the woodland to connect the exterior parking area, the gateway from Quarry Road, into the conservation area proper, to kind of separate vehicular traffic from hikers, from Bruce Trail users, folks who are hiking in off the road, or cyclists. This in contrast to design concept number 2, which utilizes the current roadway into the conservation area proper to expand, to ensure that we have enough parking spaces for more than double this, the first concept. Making use of the existing green space and open meadow for day use, picnicking, providing a natural playground area for children and families, while maintaining that separated form of pathway for pedestrians and cyclists from the parking lot area. The difference between the two, obviously, as you can see, there's a difference in the number of vehicles that we can accommodate on the site, but there's also a difference in the number of trees that would be cleared in order to provide that access space. In our earlier consultations with other community groups and stakeholders, we recognize that the increased demand and anticipated demand on the site may not be met with concept design number 1. And we acknowledge the value of concept design number 1 in being the lowest impact on the existing environment, but recognize the benefits of being able to ensure capacity upon the site, especially during migratory period when there are lots of bird watchers and folks there, and of course in the fall when we have visitors to observe the changing of the leaves. So without further ado, we have a timeline on the next slide. Over the last year or so, we've been accumulating concept designs and have conducted archaeology stage 1 and 2 on the site, which requires us to go no further. So we've completed that, as well as a topographic survey and a geotechnical report. Currently, we're engaging with community and reaching out to stakeholders and community groups such as you, and finalizing our concept designs. We hope in 2024 to complete our project, and in 2025 enhance our site with more wayfinding and interpretive signage. And I'm speaking on behalf of our team, including my director, Adam Christie, manager of land planning, Eric Balden, and our senior manager of infrastructure development, Steve Miller. And so without further ado, thank you very much for your time this evening, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Alicia. Are there any questions or comments from the committee members? Councillor DeFlavio?
Thank you, Chair. Through you to Dr. Powell. So this is a bit of a spoiler, but in the next presentation, which is about our trail system, there's a discussion of stairs in this, a connection of stairs, because there's a huge demand for escarpment stairs. Is that something that the Conservation Authority has considered or discussed with the municipality? And is it something that could be considered, something that we could partner with? Because there's a huge demand for it, both for recreational purposes, from a safety perspective, and for exercise, right? That people want the stairs. So I'll let you answer, then I've got a couple of other questions.
Sure, through you, Chair. Thank you very much for the question. Certainly the opportunity to partner and provide safe access, especially with other site partners like Bruce Trail, of course, and the municipality, to be able to enhance utilization on the site in a safe way, is certainly something that we're interested in. For this project, we're simply looking at enhancing the access point to the conservation area, so that's primarily through parking and making use of the existing day use area there.
Other questions. So I saw in your presentation in both concepts, there was in concept 1, I think there was a larger wetland, and then concept 2, there's a smaller one. Was there originally, what's the reasoning behind the inclusion of a wetland here?
Excellent question. Through you, Chair. The proposed wetland area makes use of a low spot on the property. It's not only a low impact development feature, it's aesthetic, and would have to be incorporated further into design. So I think this is an earlier preliminary concept, but it's making use of very low grade area. So again, low impact development. It's quite wet in the spring, but at a time like this, it does dry up. So if you've been there for the open house on Good Friday, it can get pretty mucky in that spot. So it's making use, the design concept makes use of that low grade area.
Okay, thank you. And that sounds great. And I know exactly what you're talking about there. Has there been, and now I know this is just an access, but between the eastern parking lot, which is behind the Scout Hall, and the west and the rest of the conservation area, the access along the road is not safe, for lack of a better way of putting it. Has there been any discussion with the region about improving that? Because I've walked it with my kids, I've walked it alone, and you have to climb over the guardrail, walk along the side of the road, climb over the guardrail again, and then you get back on the trail that takes you back through the back of the conservation area. I know that this is about parking, but improving the safety of the whole park would make a lot of sense, even if it's just signage on the road or, a bump out of some kind for pedestrians. Has any thought gone into that or discussion with the region about the regional road there?
Through you, Chair, that's a really great question as well. And I acknowledge, I know exactly what you're talking about, the challenges with that. As part of this project, that's not been part of the discussion, but it's certainly something for me to note and to take back and have discussions with the appropriate parties. And additionally, acknowledging some of the private land ownership along that roadway as well, and what that looks like in terms of access and negotiating between the Scout Hut property and that access point and Quarry Road.
Are there any other questions? No? Okay, well, thank you very much. Appreciate that. So we will now be moving on to 6.2, a presentation by Claire Basinski from SEMA Plus regarding the Recreational Trails Master Plan update.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody from the committee. Thank you so much for having us here. I'm joined by my colleague, Samantha Legere, who has been working tirelessly with me and members of town staff over the past couple of years on the Recreational Trails Master Plan for the town of Grimsby. We are getting close to completion, but this has been a very consultative and a very engaging process where we are trying to seek as many opportunities at the master plan level to explore what it looks like to envision a future of more connectivity and access to recreational opportunities within the town. And so our presentation this evening is going to give you, as members of the committee and as members of council, a little bit of a history overview of what we've been working on over the past couple of years, because we do anticipate bringing the report to you, to council, in the early fall or later this year, and would like you to have as much information as possible about the context, the considerations, and the components that went into the development of this plan. So those are our purposes, and next slide. In terms of how we have created this plan and worked towards its creation, I should say, because it still very much is in its draft creation, is it's been a very iterative and, as I said, consultative process as much as we could within the confines of the after effects of COVID-19. But we have been working very much with staff and stakeholders and other community members to work through a process of reviewing the different options and opportunities, as I said, to enhance overall trail access and recreation within the town. I must note that throughout this process, we were trying to be as responsive to the interests of the community and input from stakeholders as much as possible. And so you'll note in this slide a bit of a new scope item, we have since completed it, that was based on direction from council last year to explore the feasibility of a rail width trail along the CN Rail corridor. Through that process, we have determined that that isn't feasible in the majority of the locations, and I'm happy to speak to some of the details of that if there is interest. But we are still very committed to finding a series of strong trail spines that are as off-road as possible and as recreational as possible, linking major destinations within the town, and we'll speak to that a little bit later. Next slide. So what are we trying to focus on? What are our commitments here? This is a master plan. This is, as I've talked about with some individuals, a 10,000 foot level. This is our aspiration. This is what we are hoping to achieve and putting our best foot forward to set out a strategy, to set out a vision for the next 20 years to try to achieve our goals and objectives regarding recreational trails. We are focusing on what we are talking about as recreational mobility, increasing the access, increasing the connection, increasing the ability for individuals who live, work, and play within the town to be able to use trails and to recreate. And so we consider these key elements that you see on this slide and make sure that we are touching on all of them as we work through our process, focusing on the fact that this plan needs to be adaptable to changes that occur every year, every month, as this town grows and adapts and as new opportunities arise. So while the plan will be developed and hopefully adopted this year, we are very optimistic that this plan will also be very flexible and adaptable to the needs of the town, the work that town staff needs to do, and great opportunities that arise that we may not even be aware of now. It's also interesting to note that not all trails are equal for everyone, and that doesn't mean that we don't put our best foot forward to provide equitable opportunities to provide access to recreation. That just means that not everybody uses trails in the same way. And so we really are aiming to provide a range of opportunities through this trail system, depending on how people would like to use them, how they need to use them, and how they would like to experience nature and try to get to where they need to go. Next slide. So where does this plan fit? How does it fit into the overall structure? It does not stand alone. And this recreational trails master plan will become part of a very strong framework that the town will have in order to support recreational mobility, transportation mobility, and general access and connectivity. It is part of a series of strategies that are within your planning and policy framework that you either have in place or will start to develop going forward. I've mentioned before that trails can sometimes be the most challenging to find, and they're the greatest gems to identify because they are in these unique places and spaces that are typically natural areas or parks where you want to preserve the experience and you want to preserve the environment. But if you find those opportunities and you identify them and you start to track them and monitor them, then that really gives us a great point to start from looking at opportunities for wider transportation opportunities, wider connectivity opportunities, as I understand that you'll be possibly exploring a transportation master plan in the future, maybe other active transportation initiatives. This is kind of that backbone, that framework from which we can grow on. So it will be part of a very strong piece of planning guidance and policy that you will continue to have and you will grow over time. Next slide, please. So what are we committing to? What are we looking to achieve? As part of a master plan or strategic plan, we start by setting out a vision and a series of goals or objectives that we aim to achieve. They help us to define what we ideally want to have realized in the future. So through the initial stages of our project, we use the input that we gathered through engagement and outreach, as well as conversations with staff and stakeholders to develop a recreational trails vision and a series of objectives that have very much been our cornerstone as we have developed the trail system and recommendations that will eventually become part of the recreational trails master plan. Next slide. And we couldn't capture every single piece of input on a series of slides. We have a detailed consultation record, but we have done a brief summary just to provide you with a bit of a sense or flavor of what we've been hearing. And we tried to reach out to the community in a number of different ways: online engagement, public sessions, stakeholder workshops, pop-ups and events throughout the community, presentations like this, where we have tried to have individual stakeholder outreach and one-on-one conversations where we felt as was necessary. So we have tried our best to get the word out there. This is not the final conversation. As any of these projects move forward, as you proceed with implementation, there will be many more opportunities for even more robust consultation and outreach with the community, individual landowners, and other stakeholders. So this is merely the starting point. You know, we heard wonderful things, really excellent identifications of aspects of the trails that members of the public love and feel excited about. But we also heard that there was a significant need for opportunities to find new trails and to find new ways to enhance the system. So we want to see and we want to explore ways to make trails more connected, more continuous, safer. We want to ensure that we are preserving the natural environment and the environment itself. We want to make sure that we find opportunities that are easy to find and easy to access. So once again, these continue to be the touch points from which we have provided our recommendations and explored the network. Next slide, please. Another series of examples, just for your review and consideration of some of the input that we were provided and some of the specific points where we look to explore those opportunities. This was a very helpful point in our process. We were actually able to identify locations that we were able to explore and field investigate and look to whether the opportunities were feasible or valid at the master plan level, as well as additional opportunities for enhancements to the trails system. We'll speak about this later, but the network is not just a link or a route. A network or a system is truly enhanced by the amenities, the other enhancements that go along with it to ensure that people have that strong experience and that positive, safe, comfortable experience while they are using the trail system. Next slide, please. I've mentioned that the plan will have recommendations and a system. Those are our two core components of the master plan that we are developing. And when we looked at the recreational trails network or the recreational trails system, we went through a very iterative process that built in a continual consideration of what the trail needs are, what the barriers are, and what the priorities are. And this is a pretty typical process for identifying any series of projects, but we did make it and adapt it to be consistent with the objectives that we were trying to achieve for this project, as well as the unique context that's found in the town of Grimsby. Next slide, please. These are my most hated maps to put up on a presentation because you can barely see anything. So apologies, but I know that we have provided large-scale maps to the town, which will be made available. We will also be posting these with directions on how to zoom in and out and how to access more focused maps through the Let's Talk page. And I believe they will be made available hard copy if needed. Please feel free to reach out to any of the team members. But this is our proposed trails network, our proposed trails system. What we started by doing was setting a series of intents. What is the intent of these routes? What do I mean by that? What I mean is that some of them are really significant systems and links that provide direct connections and access to major destinations, while others are very localized improvements that are unique to certain areas and provide local access. So we have broken down the network into these different types of trails, and if we go to the next slide, there's a more detailed description of what that each means. So we have 4 different types of trail intents or trail purposes, if you will. The spine trail that I referenced before, which very much is that east-west connection, as well as a 40-mile creek extension and 2 others. Are priority linkages that we see are major destinations within the town and critical connections to get to and from major areas, as well as key trail linkages that exist and that are planned. The secondary routes are the connecting links or secondary links of trails that are found in localized areas through parks and open spaces. The third component, which is the actual connecting link component or intent, are the on-road linkages that provide access in between the trails. And last but certainly not least are the trail transitions, which acknowledge where there are barriers, where we may need different features to access across the trails and provide connectivity that way. Next slide. So we move into then, what do these trails look like? We know where we think they are going to be or where we hope they will be, but what could they look like? And I mentioned earlier in the presentation that not all trails will be built the same, but we try to find some general guidance and some general standards around what they could look like in order for the town to have the goals and objectives for how they would design them and implement them ultimately. Next slide. So we have a series of different trail design classifications, and there will be standards and guidelines provided for each. And you see the range on this slide, including major destination urban trails, which are very wide, asphalt with a large degree of amenities, all the way to rural naturalized trails. And we also have the on-road connecting links, which we have discussed with the Engineering and Public Works Department and had conversations about what those look like, and those are more to do with on-road design guidance. But within the range of urban destination trails to rural trails, you see differences in surface type, in width, in natural environment, in amenity expectations, and we have identified a design classification for each of the links identified as part of the recreational trails network. Next slide, please. And I mentioned the trail transitions, and typically these are referred to as amenities, but we didn't want to do a disservice to that. It's not just a bench in one place. This is about finding opportunities to enhance the overall experience of the trails in order to encourage and to attract people, but also to make them feel comfortable and safe while they're using and experiencing that space. So we have identified a number of locations for trailheads, for these amenity enhancements, and we are also coming up with an application based on the different trail types of what degree of amenity would be implemented along each of them. And that guidance will be part of the plan. Next slide, please. So if we just provided you with a whole network of many kilometers of trails and said, best of luck, go ahead and prosper, that would probably be a little bit daunting. So our next step in the process was to identify a series of project priorities as well as phasing. And those two are different. Priorities indicate projects that are of critical importance or different levels of importance as identified through projects that have already been done by the town or partners, as well as input that we've received through public input and stakeholders. Phasing has to do with the timing that we think that can occur based on who it is that is responsible for it and how complex the project is. So we've come up with guidance on what those could be and what the timing looks like. Next slide, please. And this is just a breakdown of how the network has been identified within each of those categories. You can see that prioritization isn't intrinsically intertwined with phasing, so a high priority project doesn't necessarily always happen in the short term. It really has to do with how feasible and implementable those projects are. So once again, we are trying to provide the town with as much of a realistic, a feasible, and implementable but also ambitious plan as much as possible and provide that clarity on next steps and implementation. Next slide, please. So this is just an illustration of what those projects are based on the different categories, and absolutely encourage a deeper dive into these maps as it's probably impossible to see it on the screen right now from those in the audience. Next slide, please. And once again, same thing with the phasing, range of phasing. This is not meant to be prescriptive. This is meant to be a guidance tool. This is meant to be a starting point. Things change, things adapt. We acknowledge that, but this at least gives us a bit of a framework to move forward from. Next slide, please. And again, we have a series of high priority projects that may be of interest to the group and to those members of the community. We feel quite strongly that these very much reflect what we have heard from community input and consultation, as well as the importance of having linkages that are together attracting and accessing these destinations. So we have come up with a bit of a unique approach through this prioritization where we are grouping projects and we are allowing those to create very appealing and attractive opportunities, providing access to major destinations within the town. Next slide, please. So probably second most not appealing slide to see in addition to small scale maps would be what does this cost? But I also think it would be a disservice again to the town if we weren't transparent and upfront about what this could cost. And this isn't a commitment to monies. This isn't yes, 100%, this is what it will cost in the end, but it at least provides you similarly with a bit of a framework and a bit of a sense of what that investment could be. And it isn't just on the backs of the town and of the residents who live here. There are definitely opportunities for partnerships, for funding, for external access to monies that we will be exploring and we will be identifying through this plan. So a starting point for transparency purposes and for annual budgeting purposes, but absolutely something that will be explored in terms of other opportunities for supplementary funding and cost recovery. Next slide, please. And I believe we're getting towards the end because I've already taken up far too much time, and I really appreciate it. But in addition to the network and the system of improvements and recommendations there, we also have a series of other recommendations, 43 in total, that hit on the other core components that make a plan successful. It's not just about committing to something you're going to build, but bringing trails into the ongoing conversation and policy framework, as well as the day-to-day practices of town staff and your decision makers. So we have come up with a series of recommendations that deal with design. How do you consistently design different trail infrastructures and trail linkages? How do you build different principles like universal design or crime prevention through environmental design or accessibility into those principles? How do you build them? Where are they being built? How are they being coordinated with development and other projects? What does that look like from a timing perspective? Encouragement. How do you change behavior? How do you encourage people to use trails more often or to recreate more often? How do we encourage that activity even more so within the town, which has been growing over the past couple of years? Implementation, which are the policies, the processes, sort of the day-to-day. What do we need to do to embed this into capacity and into practice? And last but certainly not least, adaptation. How do we ensure that this plan doesn't become a plan that sits on a shelf and collects dust? And we truly believe that some of these strategies will really help to ensure that this is updated, monitored, managed, and also brought forward and flexible as we move through the implementation timeline. Next slide, please. Our next steps. As I mentioned, we are working towards the development of the master plan, and we're aiming to have that in early to late fall of this year. We're very much accepting comments and questions at this point, and we can build those into the master plan. We feel very strongly about the network of improvements, but the priorities, the recommendations, all of those pieces, we would love to hear any input that you have. We will be continually updating the Let's Talk page, finding opportunities for some additional promotion over the summer, and then we will be back at council, I'm sure, in early fall with the plan. So thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, Claire. Are there any comments or questions from the committee? Councillor DeFlavio.
Thank you, Chair, through you. So you mentioned the railway, the inability to put a trail along the railway or along the hydro corridor. If you could explain in a little more detail the why not part of that, and also further to that, even if it's not possible now, I really think that it's important that we include the fact that we would like to see it there in a master plan. You talked about this being a long-term plan for 20 years down the line. Things change over the time, and the people in charge at CN and the people in charge at Hydro One change over time. So I would really like to see that east-west hydro corridor or rail corridor portion of the trail noted in the master plan, and the fact that we would like to see that, even if it's not doable right now, I'd really like to see that as part of the plan. I think that that's an important, that was why we brought it to you. I get that you're telling us we can't do it right now, but that doesn't mean we can't say that we'd like to do it. And that's what, because none of this is really what we're going to do today. There are things that we're going to hopefully get in the budget for next year and get this started, because otherwise there's no point to have this document if we're not going to start acting on it. But anyway, I'm going to let you answer. I don't want to go on too much of a tangent. I would love to hear the reasoning behind the discussions with CN and Hydro One, and maybe if you can explain it to the members of the public that aren't here why that's not a feasible thing right now, please.
Absolutely, through you, Chair, and great question. We probably could have done an entirely separate conversation and presentation on just that particular link, and originally we had planned that, but we thought that it would be a good opportunity to focus more on the wholesale network, but I do appreciate the question. So a couple of clarifications on that particular feasibility study. You'd mentioned Hydro One and CN. We're happy to report that the Hydro One conversations that we did have were very positive. And for the link where we have identified a potential trail to the north of the rail lands on an easement that Hydro One has, they're very supportive of that. And that will be a really great success that the town can see in the west end of the town, which is very exciting. So Hydro One, very much on board, and there are no concerns in terms of safety or feasibility of that link at this master plan stage. In terms of the CN rail, we deep dove into that feasibility and we worked with our colleagues and our specialists to deal with rail safety as well as consultations with CN. The rail corridor is a Class 1 rail corridor, which means there are 6 trails at about 65 kilometers per hour along that rail corridor. Based on those pieces of information in that classification, it brings this rail corridor up to the highest level of corridor, which requires the greatest degree of separation and safety for any users. Unfortunately, Canada doesn't have guidelines and standards that are specific to some of these directions and regulations, but there is federal direction from the US which can be used. And so we looked at that along with other best and comparable practices in addition to consultation with CN. What we did when we were exploring the linkage was we took about a 21-meter buffer from the rail line out, which would have been the minimum distance that you could possibly have a trail. There were 3 locations that we identified where that could be potentially possible based on our detailed field investigation and review of the entire linkage and corridor. When we went to CN, we brought them preliminary detailed design drawings. We brought them our review of what the location of the trail could be and what the potential design of the trail could be. We had 2 conversations with them, and at the end of the day, they said, we acknowledge the work that you've done. At this time, we do not see it ever being possible. So full transparency, that was the outcome of that conversation. To your point, the identification and the record of where we had thought those linkages could be and the desire of those linkages will absolutely be part of the Trails Master Plan and will be part of the record. We have tried where possible to be off-road as much as possible for the East-West Trail. And so we set a 250-meter buffer and a 500-meter buffer around the rail corridor with the preference to stay within 200 meters so that we kept that same feel, that same intent for the entire trail linkage. And again, we tried where we could. If we couldn't get off-road in terms of the linkage itself, could we put in something that felt similar, like an in-boulevard multi-use pathway or a pathway in place of a sidewalk? So, that is the fullest extent of what we did in terms of review. We do feel like we now have as open a door as you can with CN, but, an open door with the CN contacts that we have. I'm sure we could ask them again in a couple of years' time if we wanted to continue to explore them. And building on that, I think that is one of the great successes, as Sarah and I have talked about many times, of this process is some of the great conversations that we have been having with some of the great partners, some of who are here today, as well as others. We talked to the region, school boards, Hydro One, Grimsby Power, CN, among others, to explore many of these options.
Thank you. The hydro corridor idea, I walk along the lake in Hamilton to Burlington, and if it wasn't for those, people complain about hydro corridors, but if it wasn't for the hydro lines along the waterway there wouldn't be no trail, because, that's why I thought maybe we could do it using the hydro corridor there, but as you said, it's being leased from CN, so it's unfortunate. And if it had been done 50 years ago, before the requirements of a berm and all the things because now there are so many and rightfully so, preventative measures that are in place, but my concern is that when you don't provide a trail, and you can see it when you go around town, when you don't provide a trail, people make their own. And, so for example, on Casablanca Boulevard, on the west side of Casablanca Boulevard, there's a sidewalk on the east side that the town built that is a beautifully paved sidewalk that goes across the railway tracks, and there is absolutely no reason for people to use the west side. But if you go there, you see the human pedestrian, the grass has a hole in it from the number of people that walk on it, well worn. And, there's lots of studies done where you allow the people to walk and then build the sidewalks later. And that's one of those examples where you can see that the need is there because there are pedestrians using it every day. People that go to work at the different places, runners, all those things. So in this case, my fear is that if we don't provide it there are already people using the walking along the railway, which is not safe. And as the population of Grimsby grows, especially for me, from an active transportation, and I know that this is not an active transportation study, but they're all kind of intertwined. And from an active transportation perspective, that once that GO station is built, people will take the shortest route to get there. And if we don't provide it for them, they'll make their own, which is a lot less safe than the alternative, which is, anyway. The other thing that I wanted to mention was, and I thank you, first of all, I don't think I thanked you at the beginning, and thank you because there are some great ideas in here for you and staff and everybody that was involved in this process. I'm hoping that we could find some low-hanging fruit in the short run that we can get going as quickly as possible. A couple of oversights, I think, from my personal knowledge, at the top of Wolverton Road, that access to the Bruce Trail is probably the best Bruce Trail portion in Grimsby for sure, and in West Niagara, definitely. And there's not really any way to get there other than by car, because Wolverton Road is not a safe pedestrian road. It's on the bike trail, but it's not really a bike trail. So again, in the long run, and I know that this is going to require a lot of partnerships with Public Works and the region, because some of these go across regional roads and all of these things. But I think we need to acknowledge that Wolverton Road needs to be made safer for pedestrians, because again, my house backs onto Wolverton Road. I see people walking and biking up that road every day, and people need to be able to access that trail at the top. There's no parking there, and it's a phenomenal portion of trail between Wolverton Road and 50 Road that I've walked hundreds of times with my family. We need to put Wolverton Road and the improvement of Wolverton Road for pedestrians and bikes as a priority in this plan, so that way everybody has safe access to that, whether they have a car or not. That's the only thing that, but thanks again. Thanks, Katie, for letting me go.
Councillor Korstanji?
Thank you. So just to touch on a couple things, I see that we have an accessibility lens when looking at this, and I think that's fantastic. I'm hoping that we're considering the full accessibility of the connected trail, so that it's just not portions of it that it's accessible, so that you can actually use a large portion of it. So I'm assuming that's being looked at. My other question is safety. So from a safety perspective, from electric bikes or say electric vehicles using the trail and pedestrians and how that's going to mix, I think we're going to use, as Councillor DeFlavio said, people are going to use this as a commute, which I mean, ideally we want more people out of their cars. So I think we need to look at routes that are commutable, maybe, you know, working with Public Works with bike lanes, maybe on the service roads, so that we're having that point to point. So if you're going to work, it's the shortest route possible, but sort of separating from recreational use so that we don't have people flying on trails on bikes, because that can be super dangerous. The other safety aspect I'd like to see a lens of is personal safety. In areas with lots of trails, there are lots of assaults. And we need to make sure that the areas that we're creating are safe, and that if the need be, that it's populated, so that it's not just off somewhere that is completely isolated. So if you do need help or you don't feel safe, that there's always some sort of safety aspect there. So I'm hoping that we're looking at a safety lens from a few different avenues.
Wonderful, thank you. Through you, Chair, and I'll go through each one of those. From an accessibility perspective, absolutely. I think one of the important things with trails is that there sometimes is an expectation that they will all be accessible, and that isn't the case because of the natural spaces through which they pass. That's not to say that we aren't committed to finding connected opportunities where we are trying to meet the AODA built standards. And so you'll see in the urban destination trails and in the plan, we'll give much more detailed guidance and standards on what that looks like. There is much more of a commitment to AODA compliance for those types of trails. Whereas the more rural, naturalized trails, we would want to leverage signage and wayfinding as well as any other communications to set the appropriate expectations for accessibility. But absolutely to your point, making sure that there aren't gaps in those systems or a lack of awareness or understanding of what is to come and what is expected is very much part of our signage and wayfinding strategy, as well as the design guidance for the different trail classifications. So that's for the accessibility. When it comes to the potential conflicts related to safety, something we couldn't get into detail here, would take far longer, would be some of the policy considerations and the bylaw considerations that we will be looking into as part of the plan, and absolutely looking to how you can leverage those types of tools to reduce the amount of conflicts based on different uses of trails. And that goes hand in hand with the different trail classifications as well. Where are you encouraging and expecting a wider degree of use, and where do you have to leverage those types of tools and put the right policies and bylaws in place to make that happen? And the third part, absolutely to your point, is about personal safety. And we bring in those principles of crime prevention through environmental design, which will get more detailed as you work through the next stages of these trail projects, as you work through more preliminary and detailed design. That's when you can start to look at what some of the specific interventions could be along each and every corridor. I will say that there has been quite a response, and it typically happens in any of these plans, about lighting to prevent safety, or to increase safety, increase safety. And in fact, that can sometimes be a little bit of a misnomer. Sometimes lighting in all places can encourage use at different times when you don't have as many people, and that then leads to some of the safety or discomfort concerns that come up. So we are strategically looking at lighting opportunities. There's also other technologies that we can explore, like call buttons or other safety mechanisms that go hand in hand with the amenities conversation or trail transition pieces that we were talking about. So absolutely part of that discussion, and will be detailed in the plan.
Are there any other questions or comments? Oh, okay, so you get me next. Okay, so I just had a few comments. So personally, I would like, my concern mainly has to do with starting projects, and then there are changes with zoning or lands are purchased, whatever. And I feel it's a little bit of a gamble when you are, starting a project, and then there's a piece that could just be taken apart, right? And then you have to try to navigate that whole thing. So I would personally prefer if we could pick those projects that we can have a start and a quicker finish, and that it's, all lined up, and that would be my preference, because you know that it will be completed the way that you envisioned it in the first place. The other priority would be that it would be the projects that the most people would actually use. So I see that, for different, there are a few that I won't go through which ones I like the most, but the projects that the most people that live in Grimsby would benefit from, for sure. Another thing I'd like to see, and I don't know if there was mentioned, but, if we're talking about the areas maybe people are using for shopping or going to the grocery store, making sure that we have bicycle parking, right, to try to alleviate some of the congestion downtown. That would be great. And lastly, when I was looking through these maps, is it safe to say that this is basically kind of ending at Bartlett?
So in terms of the terminus point, I guess if we could go back to the map, even though it's probably impossible to, let's not do that. It's probably easier to go back to it. So, and we have tried where we can to get to basically the east and the west and the north and the south. So we have access and entry points and exit points on either side, in all sides of the municipality. So I wouldn't say that it ends there. We have tried to look beyond the borders to see what happens next and to make sure we achieve those linkages to the surrounding municipalities so that there's a continuous trail like the aspirational Dofasco extension in our area here. So I don't see this as really having a strong terminus point, but there are definitely some ends and starts to different trail lengths.
Okay, so the reason I'm asking is because it would be nice if we could plan for the future with West Niagara Secondary School, because there are going to be a lot of students that will be going there. So if there was a safe way for them to walk or take bikes, that would be fabulous. And plus, I'm sure that area is going to be growing, and Lincoln could also benefit from that as well. So, yeah, those are just my comments.
I was going to say through the chair, but that I'm directing my comments to you. So to you, just to follow up on a couple of things. So when we were looking at the linkages into the West End, we were looking at the future site for the school. So considering that exit point and what that could look like. I'll go back to one of the other comments as well, which was about the on-road linkages and what we can do to bring in separated, safe, comfortable infrastructure for pedestrians and cyclists. And I really do appreciate one of the earlier comments acknowledging that this isn't an active transportation master plan. We have tried to marry and kind of find a bit of a middle ground where we're not exclusively an off-road trails plan, but we aren't trying to encroach into what would be a traditional active transportation master plan, which typically focuses on road. We have identified those connecting links that provide access to the primary spine trails and secondary trails, but we know that there are a number of other on-road linkages that require pedestrian and cycling improvements, and we have talked to Public Works about what those could be and are trying to facilitate that future coordination as to what it could look like. There's quite a lot of information and analysis that would need to go into that we didn't necessarily have access to, whether that's volumes and speeds on roadways or more roads needs assessments, because that wasn't our scope. But we have tried our best to identify some of those critical on-road linkages that would be coordinated with Public Works in the future. In addition to the amenities and the features, which would include bicycle parking, locking stations, as well as other pieces that add to that sort of bicycle hub or end-of-trip experience that we typically see.
Oh, that's great. Thank you very much. I guess that is all. Oh, Councillor DeFlavio.
Yeah, just a bit of background. When West Niagara Secondary was being proposed, further to your comments, we made it clear that there were safety issues regarding access to that school by any means other than by vehicle. So we do need to continue to go after the region and the school board to make sure that access to that site is safe on bike and for pedestrians, because Highway 8 there is a place where people tend to speed because anytime there's a wide open space like that. So this isn't part of this conversation, and I acknowledge that, but I did want to respond. We made those concerns clear when when the region approved that site and when the board chose that site. We need to continue to make that point as they see the uses change, because they'll see it when the kids start going there. And there will be kids that want to bike there, kids that want to walk there, and it's not a safe place for kids to access right now. And there aren't safe crossings across the road. There are numerous issues on that site that we need to deal with that are outside of the scope. That might be a whole other plan, an active transportation plan that might be the next thing that Sarah's got coming for us. But we've already got 20 years worth of work here, so maybe not. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Claire. Have a good evening. Thanks. Okay, so we are on to 6.3. We have a delegation from David Kelly regarding the Recreational Trails Master Plan update.
Good evening. My name's David Kelly. My wife and I have lived here, and actually our family, 3 daughters have lived here for 22 years. I'm a director with the Niagara Bruce Trail Conservancy, and I also on the executive with the tennis club, so the Grimsby Tennis Club. So I'm very interested in community services, and it's kind of a passion for me. I was a bird watcher and naturalist, and I love to see biodiversity and natural habitats blossom, and people having access to those things. Nick, you mentioned low-hanging fruit, so that's what this presentation is about. And same with you, Councillor. You mentioned getting one gem that for Grimsby. So it's in support of the stairway at Centennial Park. At the south end, there are baseball diamonds at Centennial Park in the east side of Grimsby, just off the Highway 81. And there's a natural path there. I don't know how legal it is to go up there now at this point, but it's muddy and treacherous. And a lot of youth from the school there go up there, and they've damaged a lot of the undergrowth there. It's a very natural place to have a stairway. At the top of the hill there is the Bruce Trail, and just a sec. I don't want to miss anything. So at the top of there is the Bruce Trail, and it's not a very far walk. I think it's 320 feet. Like if you measured it with a tape measure, just going up the hill. So it's not that far up the hill, and the slope is about an average of 25 degrees or so going up the hill, with some steeper sections. So what I would like to propose is a stairway, a metal stairway, similar to what is in Hamilton. There's 5 stairways in Hamilton and one in Beamsville, going up to Kinsman Park. And these stairways are metal, so they're durable, they're slip resistant, they're regular steps, so people can walk up them without fear of tripping or sliding on mud. The surrounding vegetation can grow close to these stairs, and it makes a very good opportunity for people to walk or to run up and down and gain some fitness even in the winter months. Next slide, please. So I put out a petition some time ago in 2021, just on change.org, and I was able to get 527 signatures of people in support of this idea. It's just a very specific idea of running a metal staircase up from the bottom of Centennial Park to the Bruce Trail. The picture there is the Kinsman Park in Beamsville, and that metal staircase was built in 2010. The Bradshaw Ironworks put it in for a cost of $270,000. And it's quite an elaborate structure, and it leads up to a park, the Kinsman Park. So what I'm saying is it provides a tremendous value for local residents. I'd really promote this as a top priority if possible. Next slide. Okay, so this is just a map of Centennial Park, and the red line at the bottom is the location where I'm proposing the stairway would go. There's a natural entrance there in the forest. As I say, a lot of children from the school have used that pathway to go up most of the hill or all the way up the hill to the Bruce Trail. That white line at the bottom of the drawing is actually misleading. There's no asphalt path or anything there. It's forest, and it's just the Bruce Trail. So so you can see there's ample parking in Centennial Park. There's a natural lead into that section. So there are nice pathways there already. There's a stream, there's a lot of beauty there. And I understand that the master plan includes a trail network from the downtown to Centennial Park, so that would be lovely. I would like to propose that this would be an official access to the Bruce Trail, because of the beauty of Centennial Park and the ease of access off Highway 81. It could be, and the access from it to the downtown core. So I'm hoping that it would boost economic activity as people come to Grimsby for the purpose of going to the Bruce Trail and enjoy the restaurants and coffee shops nearby. Next slide, please. So the benefits, of course, are that it's ready access to the Bruce Trail. The Bruce Trail has 900 kilometers of trail extending from Queenston all the way to Tobermory on the Bruce Peninsula. It's recognized as a UNESCO World Biosphere, which Joel is here to talk about after me, so that'll be very interesting. It's a year-round opportunity. The stairway would be a year-round opportunity for fitness. The stairway would prevent further erosion on the hillside, and as I mentioned, it would be an economic boon for the town. I just want to contrast that a little bit to Beamer. Beamer's a very beautiful place, and it's wonderful access to the Bruce Trail. I was interested that there's plans for more parking there, because that has been a problem. So the parking there is very limited at the moment. Next slide, please. So that's just reiterating that Beamsville and Hamilton have these metal staircases, and they're used quite well for fitness and for access to trails year round. It helps vegetation and erosion control, and the existing pathway there is muddy in the springtime especially, and would be difficult for anybody to go up there. And the kids from the school do go up there, I think, quite a bit. This is widening the path and damaging the vegetation on the hillside. Next slide. So that's just a picture showing the bottom in the wintertime without the vegetation on the trees. It shows that there is a natural pathway up the hill there, but it's, as I say, it's very rough, and people go right or left and damage the pathway going up. Next slide. These next few slides are just images at the base of Centennial Park approaching the entrance. That's the entrance a few days ago. And that's when you go through the entrance, you'll see the erosion and the wear on the trail. And then at the top of the hill, this is a view right from the trail, from that trail of the Bruce Trail. So it's very beautiful. It's a magnificent trail, and as I say, it's a continuous ribbon for 900 kilometers. And Grimsby can be very proud to have quite a few of those kilometers here in town. Thank you. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you, David. Are there any questions or comments from the committee? Of course, Councillor DeFlavia, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, a few questions. Sarah might be able to answer some of these, and then maybe David can answer some as well. Sarah, is the town allowed to, the stairways in Hamilton are older. Is the town allowed to build something that's not accessible in 2023? Because obviously the stairway is not, so I don't know. That's why I'm asking the question.
The specifics around it, I would have to look into how exactly it works. My understanding is you can still build some things that may not be accessible, but you'd want to have components maybe that are. It's not uncommon, certain aspects of trails, right, aren't fully accessible. One thing I will mention is we are putting a pathway all around, for example, at the bottom of the park that will be fully accessible. That is coming, so that's something to look forward to. So there might be ways to have accessible aspects, but still be able to have a staircase. But that's something certainly we would look at fully as well. The Bruce Trail itself going all along there is not accessible, right? So that's a factor as well. It's not uncommon as well to see stairs, the top and the bottom maybe have a park experience or something else. So I think just making sure as much as possible is accessible where it can be.
Stairs would make it accessible for many, for many more people, I think, than the current pathway, so.
Yeah, I mean, when I say accessible, I mean like accessible, because we've had to change buildings, and anything we build that's new typically has to meet AODA kind of standards, so I'm just concerned, about that. You answered one of my other questions, because getting people to that stairway would be important, and right now you'd be walking through grass, so a walkway around the outside of the park will help solve that. Who owns the land? Is it owned by the municipality there? Because sometimes land is donated to the Bruce Trail, sometimes it's owned by private. Do we know who owns this parcel of land?
Yeah, through the chair, we do own a good chunk of the specific area he's speaking of.
So, Mr. Kelly mentioned, I think you said $270,000 in 2010, the stairway that was built, which means like at least $500,000 in 2023 or more. So, I mean, price is going to be a significant factor here, because $500,000 for something that's not visible and not accessible. I'm in favor of it, so please don't misunderstand me, but it's a huge chunk of money for something that's kind of hidden. It's going to be hidden, and despite the fact that there's parking in Centennial Park, it's not a huge amount of parking, and people will want to go there and use this. Typically, in Hamilton, you used the example of Hamilton. In Hamilton, you have access from the top and the bottom. In this case, you're going to have access from the bottom, so it's going to be people going up and then coming back down the same way, or there's only one way to get to it. People aren't going to be coming along the Bruce Trail to use the stairs, probably, So those are all things we need to consider when we're thinking about this program. Of course, there's a huge environmental assessment that would be required on this site. There is a neutral burial ground in the park itself, so we would need to do probably a historical or geological assessment in the ground there. So there are lots of things that go into this project that isn't just building a staircase. So the short answer is yes. The long answer is there's a lot that we're going to need to do in order to get this done. So so those are all things we need to consider if this is something that the municipality chooses to go forward with. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, the neutral burial ground is at the front. And I guess if a path was being built around the circumference, that would have to be done for the path as well, wouldn't it? So, yeah.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Cristangi?
Thank you. Not really any questions, but I've used the Beansville stairs. I've used the Hamilton stairs. I think this would be fantastic from a fitness standpoint, and it would be, it would give accessibility to fitness to members of the community that can't necessarily afford gym memberships and things like that. So it would be something that would be accessible from a cost standpoint. I also think our teams and our sports and stuff would actually get really good use out of it. I know in Hamilton, a lot of the hockey teams, a lot of the other sports use it in their dryland training as part of their fitness. And since we are short on facilities for those things, this would serve that purpose as well. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
I will offer my comments as well. So I am in support of this. Obviously, I've spoken a lot about recreational activities, and I think this would be a good complement, especially when we talk about the trails that we just had before that. I feel like this is the one that I would like to see, because I feel with the escarpment, there would be a lot of use, I think, from people on the south side. But then if we have the link, it would also draw in the north side, right? So I really like this. Preference for me would be similar to the way Beamsville has done that. I've used that quite a bit. It's wider and it's not as steep as the Hamilton stairs. So I like that. And I'm thinking, you had said, Councillor DeFlavio had mentioned it would be upwards of $500,000. I'm thinking it's probably more like, closer to $1 million, really, considering inflation and everything right now. All those costs coming up later. So what else was I going to say? The other thing that I like is that there's the parking lot already there. So that's a huge benefit. I think this is the one project I think that a lot of people would get benefit from, right? Now I'm just going to ask actually Sarah if this is something that we might possibly be able to get a grant for.
Through you, Chair. So, we always are scouring for grants, and I would say it could be possible. It depends on which ones come out at certain times, but I think there could be opportunities where we would see that. And one of the benefits of identifying them in the plan, as we've been talking about earlier, is having that readiness, right, to be able to respond quickly when those opportunities do come. And I think that's going to be one of the big successes out of the plan we're doing, and even some of the costing, so that, because typically these grants come out and you have like 3 weeks to submit them, so we have some readiness to respond with confidence as to what that could look like. So that's an answer to your question. And just, we did hear a lot about this as well through the trails work. This came up quite a bit, as the idea of stairs. And if I may as well, just for as far as costing as well, it also depends on materials, right? So, it could be, and how exactly you design it. But again, the closer we get to a readiness to be able to access types of funding, that's great.
Okay, thank you, David. Have a good evening. Oh, sorry, Councillor Howe has one more question. Yes, Councillor Howe?
What we haven't, or no one's touched on, is these things have to be maintained. someone has to take care of them, some has to, I mean, if you want to have them 365 days a year, you're going to have a team that's going to take the ice off of those things. You've got trying to access it, to try to access it from the top. And if you try to do a loop, and someone used that term around me, a loop, you're going up 2 times. And that's not an easy, I've only done the escarpment in front of Mountain Street on where I live twice in my 30 years there, and I'm not about to try it again. You know, so it's, there's a lot more than just the one capital cost.
You're right, they'd probably need de-icing. I'm not sure what's involved, the what Beamsville does in the way of, or Hamilton for that matter, what their costs are, but they would probably have a reference as to the maintenance costs. I don't imagine it's a lot other than ice or debris, removing debris, but I could be wrong.
Okay, I think that's it. Thank you, David. Okay, so we're moving on to 6.4. Our last delegation is from Joel Swagerman of the Bruce Trail Conservancy regarding the recreational trails master plan update.
Thank you. Good evening. Yes, my name is Joel Swagerman. I'm a land acquisition planner with the Bruce Trail Conservancy. And I'm pleased to be joined here today by a couple of our volunteers, David being one of them, and Sam and Elaine, and Kayla is also one of our trail ambassadors this summer. So it's great to have you all here. So I just want to start by pointing out our mission and vision, because a lot of people know about the Bruce Trail, but in my experience, not a lot of people know much about the Bruce Trail Conservancy. So that's who I'm representing today. And our mission is to preserve a ribbon of wilderness for everyone forever. And our vision is the Bruce Trail secured within a permanently protected natural corridor along the Niagara Escarpment. So that's really what we're working towards. Next slide. So the Bruce Trail Conservancy is one of Ontario's largest land trusts, and we steward Canada's longest and oldest marked footpath. We conserve, we restore, and we manage land along the escarpment to protect its ecosystems for the benefit of all. And we make it available to explore via the Bruce Trail. We're a member-driven, volunteer-based charitable organization, and we're governed by a 19-member board of directors, and working with each of our 9 Bruce Trail clubs, so Niagara and Iroquois are the 2 in Grimsby. We work with them, and we're committed to caring for the Bruce Trail and preserving land along its route. So the Bruce Trail, as David mentioned, is 900 kilometers long from Niagara to Tobermory. And it was started in the early 1960s as a way of raising awareness of the need to protect the Niagara Escarpment. At that time, there was a lot of development coming towards the escarpment from the GTA, things like quarries especially. And so it was recognized that it was an important topographical and geographical feature and needed to be protected. And that was predating the Niagara Escarpment Plant and all those other regulations. So we have what we call the Bruce Trail Optimum Route, and that's where we want the trail to be ultimately. And currently, 70% of the Bruce Trail Optimum Route is secured. So that would be, it's on land that the Bruce Trail Conservancy owns, or it's on land that's owned by one of our partner conservation agencies, such as the NPCA or Ontario Parks or National Parks. So we've got 30% to go, and that speaks to our vision of the Bruce Trail secured within a permanently protected natural corridor. So we're working hard to complete the rest, and it's kind of like a jigsaw puzzle. We have to seize on opportunities when we find them, so on an average year, we're securing about 15 properties. So with that, we've protected over 16,000 acres along the Niagara Escarpment. Next slide, please. So another kind of hard to see map. It's a theme here, but this is the Bruce Trail in the town of Grimsby. And there's around 16 kilometers of main trail and 3.7 kilometers of side trail. And the Bruce Trail Conservancy owns 10 properties in the town, and we manage another 8 on behalf of Ontario Heritage Trust. And so those are the black sort of properties that you can see there. And the NPCA is the darker green, and other public lands are lighter green. So we've got our work cut out for us in the town of Grimsby to secure more land, and that's what we're focused on. We have secured around 5 acres in the town in the last couple of years, so we're seeing some progress, which is nice. Next slide. So we recently released our 2030 strategy. So that strategy has a number of key pillars that are part of it, and I'll just sort of detail 2 of them tonight. The first one is to urgently protect land. And we recognize that there's a climate change crisis, there's a biodiversity crisis, and that's where the urgency comes from. We know that the Niagara Escarpment is under development pressure all the time, all along the route. So we want to make sure that we're protecting land so that we can take those actions to protect those sensitive ecosystems. And how we do that is we collaborate with landowners, conservation organizations, and other partner agencies such as yourselves to secure escarpment lands. The other key pillar that I'm going to highlight is to enhance the Bruce Trail experience. And that sort of speaks to the stairs idea and the access point idea. So we want to make sure that the Bruce Trail meets world-class sustainable trail design and maintenance standards. Obviously, a scramble up the side of the escarpment is not sustainable. So that's something that we want to try to avoid. And to your point, Councillor, that's, if you notice where there's desire lines, people are still going to use it no matter what you try to do to prevent them to do that. So, and we also want to increase awareness of how to navigate the Bruce Trail and reduce the environmental impact of navigating the Bruce Trail, so that we need to give people opportunities to access it so they won't cause damage. And the other part of that is optimizing parking and trail infrastructure. So again, in collaboration with our partners, that's been a major focus, especially since the pandemic, where we saw a huge increase in usage and a huge demand for parking along the Bruce Trail. Our constraint is that we're only allowed to build 20 car parking lots along the Bruce Trail, so max 20 cars. And it takes a long time to get approval for those, but we are working on that. Next slide. So I think this is probably a well-known fact, but the impact of trails is significant, both in terms of the economy and in terms of health. So Ontario should really update this trail user survey from 2014. But back then it reported an economic benefit of over $1.3 billion from people using trails. So that's anything from just tourism, but also, driving, stopping for coffee, that sort of thing. And it was credited with creating over 18,000 jobs. And then the other part of that is the health impact. We know that hiking has a positive impact on mental and physical health. And this is something that people self-report, but it's also something that's been proven through scientific studies. So we also, through this study, they also found that most people reported appreciation of nature as one of the key motivators of using trails. So in terms of appreciation of nature, Grimsby's blessed with this amazing feature running right through the middle of town, and we should try to encourage people to get there. So next slide. So I just want to wrap up here, and I came here today mostly to lend my support to to David and his idea and the concept of the Centennial Park stairs, but also wanted to introduce the Bruce Trail Conservancy to you, because I think it's been a little while since we've been here. So I just wanted to note that in the RTMP consultation and engagement, the stairs received wide-ranging support, and additional connections to the escarpment was another theme of comments. And to the point about, you know, the approvability of these stairs, we know from our experience that the Niagara Escarpment Commission is supportive generally of hiking infrastructure on the escarpment, and we have extensive experience building and maintaining stairs and other types of infrastructure. So we'd be happy to support the town in any way that we can to sort of help make this happen. With that, I just want to thank you for the opportunity to speak, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Joel. Do we have any questions or comments from the committee? Councillor DeFlavia, I'll start with you.
I think that whether the synchronicity between all of the presentations tonight was intentional or not intentional, the goal of all of this is to make Grimsby a better place to live, and access to the trail, access to trails within the urban area and outside in the urban area, all of this goes together. So I don't, Sarah, if it wasn't intentional, it's pretty incredible that all these came together tonight. But I hope we can move from. There's a saying in Italian, "Da dire a fare ci manca il mare," which means from saying to doing, there's an ocean of space in between them. I want to get to the doing part. So thanks for your presentation. But now let's move forward and let's get some of this stuff started so that we can, you know, whether it's for our grandkids or whoever it's for, let's get this moving so we can actually get some of these connections happening, and so that we have a trail system that we can be proud of for generations to come as a result of the work that's being done here tonight. So that's all I have to say. Thanks, Councillor.
Any other questions? Councillor Korstanji?
I just wanted to make a comment. So thank you for touching on the positive impact on mental health. Everything we've talked about tonight, I think, actually creates a positive impact on the mental health of our community. And I think that's a really important aspect, not only the physical health, but the mental health and the benefits of everything we discussed tonight. And so I just thank you for mentioning that, because I don't think it's often a focus point. And I think all of this, the trails and the stairs and everything, and just the fact that it would be accessible and from a cost standpoint and for everybody in town to be able to access, to have those benefits, I think is fantastic.
Just to piggyback off of, sorry, did you want to say something? Okay, just to piggyback off Councillor Korstanji's comments, I would agree that mental health for sure is a priority right now. And I've noticed that since COVID, a lot of people have been using the trails a lot more. So this again is just another opportunity that we could really, you know, get out there and start being physically active, right? So it's great. Sorry, Sarah, did you want to add in?
Thank you, Chair, and for permitting me to just add a couple of comments. I did want to acknowledge, I sincerely did not orchestrate this. Alicia and I spoke quite a while ago about this presentation, and this was on the docket too, although I do think the presentations you're seeing were prompted by the work, but I do agree that I think it really speaks to how important this is. But I think the other piece that's really exciting, and Councillor DeFlavio, you sort of mentioned, sometimes there's a really big gap between thinking about it and doing it, and I don't disagree, there's always work to be done. But one of the best things that have come out of this work so far that we've done with the SEMA team is the conversations we've had with these groups. Joel and I have met many times with it. We've met with the NPCA, Alicia and others as well. So it narrows that gap because there's really good interest, and you're hearing that tonight, to work together. And I think that's a positive change and going in the right direction, so that's really exciting. And just lastly, to echo the same, I think with the mental health benefits of this, but also the increase in use. And one trail group that's not here, because it maybe doesn't affect them directly, is also Hamilton Conservation Authority, because it is also bordering. And they've had the exact same experience with just incredible growth in numbers of their spaces for trails. So it just feels like it's a really great time for us to be putting this work through. And I think the community is going to be thrilled to see whatever we can do, small or large projects. Thank you for that.
Any other questions or comments? No? Are you sure? Okay. Okay. Can I get a mover and a seconder to receive the presentations? Okay, moved by Councillor DeFlavio, seconded by Councillor Korstanji. Resolved that the presentations from Alicia Powell and Clara Bazinski, as well as the delegations from David Kelly and Joel Swagerman, be received. All in favor? Okay, that's carried. Perfect. So we're going to move on to 7, consent reports. There are none.
Chair, sorry to interrupt you.
Yes.
We might want to let people leave so that they don't have to sit through the rest of the stuff. I'm sure that they're really interested in the rest of our meeting, but they've sat through all that, and I don't mean to interrupt you, and I apologize, but just give people a moment to leave if they don't want to sit through the rest of this.
I know you all want to stay, right? This has been very entertaining. Yes. Okay. It was great having you here. Thank you. Yes. You don't want to stay because Councillor DeFlavio will start being teacher now. Thank you. Perfect. Thank you. I know it's steep. I took almost a tumble down there. Thank you. Thank you, you too. Okay, so we are on to discussion reports. 8.1 DCS 2321, Community Services Department Information Update for June 2023. Can I have a mover and a seconder to get the report on the floor for discussion? Okay. Councillor Korstanji, moved by Councillor Korstanji, seconded by Member Laird. And Sarah, go ahead.
Chair, would you like me just to maybe quickly run through it in a quick summary and then people can ask questions at the end?
Sure, that sounds great.
Okay. So a couple of items in here. The first one was inclusion resources, and I did mention that an inclusion workshop is being planned and prepared and will be occurring during the summer. I'm happy to say that that occurred this week. We had a really great workshop talking with a variety of community members, community partners about inclusion, and we will be gathering a lot of the information and feedback we heard and be bringing that back to you soon. So excited to see some of the outcomes of that and some discussions as to some steps that can maybe be considered and taken. Good news item that there was a purple martin nest that was installed at Nellis Beach Park. I believe maybe it was even the last report I did to you. I described the nest that was placed. We were told it often takes a full 2 years before the birds will nest. And as you can see in the picture, we're delighted to see that's happened very early. It's a great news story in partnership with Bruce McKenzie and the Grimsby Lions Club. Just as a side note, we've also have some birds nesting up at Southford Park, and actually one of them is actually on a protected species list as well. So we're seeing some interesting bird occurrences in a few of our parks, which is wonderful. Parks waste receptacles. This has been something that's a bit of an ongoing challenge for us to manage. We do experience quite a bit of dumping in our parks and people depositing household or collections from their cars in our parks. So we've been looking at different strategies to manage that a little bit differently. We also know that the really large drums that we still have in some places but are slowly weeding them out really aren't necessary. They're much bigger than they need to be. They get tipped over, they get filled with rain, etc. So we piloted, as it says in here, some smaller units in our neighborhood parks. We still go with the larger receptacles, of course, with big parks. But in the small neighborhood parks where most people using it are probably walking to it for brief amounts of time. The small bins are working really well, so we're finding it's less collection. We are noticing an improvement to some of the household waste that we're finding in these cans, so we are expanding that out to other parks as well, and also looking to add another unit that will have recycling. So it's been a good news story for us so far. The one piece that some park goers don't always love is we are pulling them back a bit from the road, and this is again just simply to deter us being the car clean out spot for some people. The Grimsby Public Art Gallery exhibition is, there's a new one on right now. I do encourage you to go and see the piece. It's very unique, and how it's constructed and how it's built is really, I think, just a lovely part of the story. I know many of you saw it at the gala, which I also mentioned in here, which was an extremely successful event. They had just under 200 people for their first time doing the gala, and they had just really great experiences and are excited to bring that forward next year as well. Coronation Park, at the time of writing this, we wrote is wrapping up soon. The work that was to be done by the construction company is now completed, so the site has been fully returned back to us, which we're excited to see, and we were able to use it in part at least for happening in Grimsby, which was great. You may note we have had to disrupt some of the grass, and that is to put in the bollard lighting. And the reason we had to do it that way was simply because that piece of work was our work to be done, and we weren't able to do it until the constructor left. So it is unfortunate that's how it's worked out, but the staff are working to minimize that disruption while they get that bollard lighting in. And we're really excited. I think the lighting's going to look really nice in the park. There's also additional seating coming. There's a plaque that speaks to the history of the Forty Creek that will go with the other plaques as well we have along the Forty Creek, so some additional pieces are coming along as well with that one. And then with that, we have applied for a funding potential with the region to actually extend the new concrete pathway to the other side, and also look to make the one little piece of it that's not quite accessible, it sort of jumps down a little bit quick from Highway 8, to see if we can't make that entire length of that pathway fully accessible. I had the opportunity to attend a Niagara Trails Summit, which was focusing on the Niagara Peninsula's aspiring geopark on June the 1st. It was a really inspiring day, really exciting to see what may be coming along. It was something that was presented to with the Parks, Recreation and Culture Standing Committee back in 2019, and they did a full presentation about what the geopark was. Councillor DeFalvo, you might even recall that. And you know, that's obviously been a little bit of time, so I just wanted to bring it to your attention because it really is an exciting opportunity for Niagara Region and for Grimsby as well. As the earlier presentation from NPCA said, I think Grimsby has one of the best features in many ways of the Niagara Escarpment, and I think you'll really see that come out in the geopark. So I did put some information about it in there. I also did speak with them, and I think at a later date they would be happy to come and delegate and just talk a little bit more about it, because it is a really exciting opportunity to just be aware of as to what might come forward in our community in the future. The Peach King Center expansion project update, I just wanted to make sure for everybody's benefit that I connected you with that information of the report that went to council on June the 5th. Just recently, which did see council approving some changes to our renovation project, which does include some additional resources for an expanded gymnasium space and also some enhanced green initiatives. So I did provide a link just so that everybody on the committee is fully familiar with that work, as the regular updates for the project will be coming to this committee. So just wanted to make sure you have that information. And by all means, if you have questions or want to discuss it, I'm happy to. I'm sure the chair is as well. And just lastly, Parasport Niagara Festival was on June the 1st. And I just wanted to give a quick shout out. A lot of our staff attend, and we're just really inspired by the day, the stories that came from many athletes and individuals in the community surrounding parasport initiatives. And just, we were so delighted to actually have one of our staff team members receive a Community Impact Award just for the work that he's been doing to really support and give some assistance to the new sledge hockey group that is in the Peach King Center Arena. So that was just a really exciting experience for our team and for Ange. Any questions?
Thank you, Sarah. Any other questions? Any questions or comments? Councillor DeFlavio?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I was going to mention the Purple Martins I just learned, I was today years old, while I was, it was like last year where I found out that their migration goes all the way to South America, which is an incredible thing. Like they migrate all the way from Canada to South America in the wintertime, like thousands and thousands of miles. So they come up here and nest and then migrate Brazil is where a lot of them end up. So it's an incredible thing that we have birds in Grimsby. And I know a homeowner that has the nests, and he's the one that taught me about them because they're those special nests that they build. But it's just, it's cool that so quickly that it's being used, and I'm happy that we're providing that. So that's neat. Thanks.
Councillor Kristanji?
Thank you, through Chair. Just thank you to Sarah and your recreation staff for the Inclusion Cafe. I think that was the first time ever we've hosted something like that. Great learning experience, and thank you to the residents and professionals that came out and contributed to the conversation. I think we learned a lot. I think we learned where we can learn and contribute and help, and I think it was very informative, and I think that we're going to see a lot of good come from it and a lot of different things that will benefit our community recreationally, but our businesses and stuff like that. So thank you for your hard work on that. And congratulations to your staff member on the Parasport Award. That's amazing. We do have a lot of para-athletes in Grimsby, and we are lucky to have the Parasport office in Grimsby. So I think that's fantastic, and it's great to highlight our athletes locally that are involved in that and the people behind the scenes that do all that work. So I think that's fantastic. Thank you.
Councillor Kristanji kind of summed up everything for me with the Inclusion Cafe. I thought it was really well attended, and just from speaking to everybody that was there, and actually Member Laird was there as well. She was great. People seemed very empowered by it, so that was really nice. Like they actually, were heard and they had great ideas, and I'm hoping that we will actually start using those, and keep that connection as well, right? So if we have a list of everybody that was there, that's a great network to use later on, right? So thank you for that. So any other questions? Councillor DeFlavio.
Yeah, it wasn't mentioned in the report, but the Grimsby Town Youth Soccer Club is celebrating their 50th anniversary this weekend, which those of us who've had kids that played soccer, everybody at some point has been touched by the Grimsby Youth Soccer Club. They gave more than $200,000 when Southwood Park was built for the construction of soccer fields up there. They're huge users, but still, they are a really important organization for the town. They offer a service that is not super expensive, so it's accessible from a financial perspective, which in 2023 is a pretty big deal because a lot of our kids play sports. And I think we know the cost, of sports. When you can offer a sport like soccer for a price that is affordable for people, besides the fact that there are grants and things like that, they offer such an incredible service to the town of Grimsby, and so I just want to thank them and congratulate them on their 50 years, and I'm going to do it in person on Saturday, but I think mentioning it tonight would have been something that I wanted to do. That's all. Thanks.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you for that, and you're right, I should have, but just for everybody's benefit, I think we sent an invitation to the councillors, but I probably didn't send it to the community members because it was earlier. Just so everybody's benefit, then on Saturday is the open house, and I think it's going on all day, but pretty much like 10 to 2, I think in particular, but around noon they are doing greetings. I think they have a variety of people coming, so just want to make sure you have the time if you kind of know when maybe is the ideal time to stop by if you're able to.
Okay, so moving back, we had this moved by Councillor Korstanji, seconded by Member Laird. Resolve that report DCS 2321, Community Services Department Information Update for June 2023, dated June 22nd, 2023, be received. All in favor? Okay, that's carried. Moving on to correspondence, 9.1, Niagara Regional Police Service, special duty requests, and 9.2, Ontario News, lowering minimum age requirements for lifeguards. Can I get a mover and a seconder to receive the correspondence? Okay, moved by Councillor Howe, seconded by Member Breather. Resolved that the correspondence from the Niagara Regional Police and Ontario News be received. All in favor? Oh, sorry. Yes, comments. And, sorry, go ahead.
In respect to the police, is there a financial impact to us?
Sorry, through the chair, yes, there definitely can be. Some of the duties that we pay for police services too, so the financial impact may not necessarily be more cost, but I do share it in part because there is definitely a resource impact to us as well. Some of the supports that we would receive from the police to guide some of our special event requests is now falling a little bit more to our internal team. So there are some impacts. It's not necessarily going to cost us additional money, but in terms of time and effort and even just the expertise and the responsibilities surrounding a bit of this work is being a little bit, it is being transferred to our team.
Councillor Howe?
Just as a follow-up, I know where we live, and when they have the races and at Main and Elm, Main and Mountain, and sometimes there'd be two police officers trying to control that mayhem. Does that mean we probably don't have those? We're going to have volunteers who are going to have to be trained? Is that a concern?
Through the chair, so there could be a volunteer component to it. Just this past weekend for Happening in Grimsby, we actually hired people that are trained in traffic control. So the dilemma is, in a busy intersection, you can't just simply stick a volunteer. They need to have the proper traffic training experiences, which aren't always easy to find, to be honest. Maybe we'll see that grow as that need exists. But you may see some modification as well to certain activities and things. I know, for example, the road races are looking at a modified route to manage that because they have to manage it a bit more internally. So I just thought it was important that you were aware because it is a shift that does have community impact. And also, as I said, impact to our team as well is the expectation of sort of approving a road closure plan is falling more to our team, whereas in the past, the police were approving it and supporting it.
Are any other questions or comments there? Councillor Howe, are you satisfied with that? Yes, okay, okay, good. So that was moved by Councillor Howe, seconded by Member Breather. Resolved that the correspondence from the Niagara Regional Police and Ontario News be received. All in favor? Okay, that's carried. Is there any other business pertaining to the committee? Oh, seeing none. Moving on, the next Community Services Committee meeting is scheduled for Tuesday, July 25th at 6:30 p.m. Thank you, everyone. The meeting is adjourned.